Now that we know what's inside the envelope, let's continue the mystery in Chapter 9. I needed to talk to my mother. Hoping that she might be able to help me solve the puzzle, I headed downstairs, passing under the gaze of several centuries of Lovejoys, as I usually do. Obadiah, Abigail, Jeremiah, Ruth. I chanted, reading the names on the brass plates embedded across the bottom of each of the frames. I slowed as I reached the last two in the lineup. Matthew Lovejoy and his wife, the original Truly. Their stair tread creaked loudly as I took another step down, passing Matthew in his Civil War uniform, Union Army of course, and coming face to face with my namesake's portrait. I squinted at it. Did I look like her? I guess our hair was sort of the same color, and we both have brown eyes, but she had freckles like me. The painter didn't add them. My mother's voice drifted from down the kitchen, mingling with the clatter of dishes and silverware. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Uh-oh, I thought, suddenly struck by a pang of guilt. Hatcher and I were supposed to have taken care of the supper dishes tonight, but I got sidetracked with the envelope. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. My mom held the high note for a long moment and then swooped down to the final stanza, strumming on the old banjo. Her voice was soft and sad, so different from the way Dad used to sing it. He'd always belt it out, tossing us a wink as he slipped his arm around Mom's waist and waltzed her around the room. Singing and waltzing weren't so much on Dad's agenda these days. At all, in fact. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the doorbell rang. Could somebody get that? Mom called. I'll be out in a sec. Sure, Mom, I call back. I crossed to the front door and opened it, letting in a blast of icy air that nearly knocked me off my feet. A tall woman, nearly as tall as me, stood on our doorstep dressed in a long black wool coat. Her head was wound so thoroughly in a black scarf that only her eyes were visible. They gleamed behind a pair of black-rimmed glasses, darting around the hall. Crow, I thought. Most definitely, she's a crow. Can I help you? I said. The woman brushed past me and stepped inside. I closed the door behind her. She craned over my shoulder, peering into the living room as if she were looking for someone. May I help you? Corrected my mother, emerging from the kitchen. She smiled at her visitor and held out her hand. I'm Dinah Lovejoy. This is my daughter, Truly. Yes, I know. The woman shook my mom's hand and then extricated herself from her scarves, revealing a gaunt face sharply divided by a knife blade of a nose and topped with a poof of teased hair that looked like it had been dipped in a pot of ink. She carefully patted it into place, her mouth pruning up in a smile. I figured I'd drop by on my way home, she said, holding out a stack of mail. I'm Ella Bello. Oh, my mother replied, as if that explained everything. Well, thank you so much, Mrs. Bello. The woman looked round again. I thought I might say hello to JT, too, if he's in. I heard about what happened to him. We all did, of course. Such a pity. I've known him since he was just a little nipper. I've never heard anyone call my dad a nipper before. I filed this way to share with Hatcher and Mackenzie. He's working late at the bookstore tonight, my mother told her. Inventory, you know. Yes, I heard he and his sister were taking over the old business. Things haven't been going so well at the shop, is what I understand, she paused. Not that times are tough everywhere. Bud Jefferson over at the coin and stamp shop struggling, too. My mother's face flushed angrily. Think your family can make a go of it? Mrs. Bello continued. I mean with JT's condition and all. My husband can do anything he puts his mind to, my mother replied stiffly. Our visitor's mouth pruned up in a smile again. Well, I suppose time will tell. Good evening to you, Mrs. Lovejoy. She nodded to both of us and left. My mother closed the door firmly behind her. Well, of all the nerve. Who was that, I asked. Only the biggest busybody in Pumpkin Falls. Your grandmother warned me about her. She's the postmistress. Is the coast clear? Someone whispered. My mother and I jumped. Turning around, I saw my father peering out from behind the kitchen door. I came in through the barn, he said. I recognized her car in the driveway. I'm not up to one of Ella's interrogations, not tonight. He shook his head wearily. Truly, I think it's time for you to go upstairs and get ready for bed, my mother told me. What? It's not even 9 o'clock yet. It's been a long day for everyone, she added with a slight but significant nod in my father's direction. But no buts, honey. She gave me a gentle push towards the stairs. Go on now. I hesitated. I could tell my mother was worried about Dad, and I was torn between a wish to be obedient and a burning desire to enlist her help with the mystery envelope. Obedience won again. Yes, ma'am, I said meekly. See you in the morning. Good night, sweetheart. She stretched up to kiss my cheek, then followed my father into the kitchen. I started upstairs, then paused, listening to the murmur of my parents' voices. Something was clearly up. I snuck back downstairs, flinching as I stepped on the squeaky stair tread. The portrait of the original Truly gave me a disapproving look. Yeah, I know, I whispered to her. It's not polite to eavesdrop. Tiptoeing down the hall, I peeked through the crack between the kitchen door and its frame. Did you get any dinner? My mother asked my father. I can fix you a plate of leftovers if you'd like. True and I ordered pizza, my father replied. He shrugged his jacket off and flung it over one of the chairs at the kitchen table. Though heaven knows we shouldn't have spent the money. My mother leaned back against the sink. Is everything okay? Okay? Huh. My father gave a short laugh. It's a mess, Dinah. A real mess. I don't know how my parents kept the business afloat like this last year, even with the bank loan. I drew back, feeling guilty for listening, but unable to pull myself away. A chair scraped against the floor, and I heard my father sit down. They borrowed some money a while back to help the bookstore through what they told me was a dry spell, he went on to explain. The note's coming due soon, and I'm not sure how we're going to pay it. My mother murmured something I didn't catch. The accountant doesn't hold up much hope, my father told her, but True seems to think we can turn things around. She wants to give it 6 months, but I just don't think it's worth it. Realistically, it'll take every cent we have to keep the bank from foreclosing on the loan. We're stretched pretty thin as it is. Even with my pension and the insurance money and all, we still have college for the kids to save for, and we're dipping into savings for your tuition. I'll drop out, my mother said quickly. You will not. Better we just admit this whole thing has been a mistake and call it quits. I'll get a part-time job then. On top of a full load of classes plus the kids? Come on, Dinah. I'm willing to give it a go if you are, my mother told him. I know you, JT. You've never backed away from a challenge in your life. You'll have a hard time forgiving yourself if you don't give this your best shot. My father was quiet. Seconds ticked by. Then, 6 weeks, he said finally. I'll give it 6 weeks. I turned and crept back upstairs to my room, where I lay in bed for a long time. What if 6 weeks wasn't long enough? All right, so she's trying to enlist help for somebody with this mystery envelope, but some bigger things are going on in their family. What's happening in the book? What's happening with her family? What sort of thoughts are you having in your head about the situation? And of course, what kind of feelings does that give you in your heart?